according to outlets such as WLBT, the Mississippi Board of Nursing has apparently launched this professional misconduct investigation against Nolan's mom, Christine Wells Winsley. And apparently there was an anonymous complaint. Well, Ben Crump, who I've mentioned represents the Wells family, said that this was, quote, a warning shot to essentially intimidate Christine Winsley and keep her quiet about looking into what happened with her son. Highlights that she has never had a complaint before. He said, quote, attacking a grieving mother's career does not answer the question of what happened to Nolan. It tells us the question matters and the answer is scaring somebody. We will keep asking questions and demanding the facts until Christine knows how her son died. I should note that Christine posted on Facebook that the Mississippi Board of Nursing has now closed this professional misconduct case, saying, quote, thank you to all of those who have constantly kept us in your prayers. This definitely has added more hurt to an already devastating time because
an 18-year-old college football player goes missing after a July 4th boating trip off the coast of Mississippi. His body was found 2 days later, washed ashore on Horn Island. The cause of death, undetermined. The manner of death, also undetermined. That is where the documented facts begin, and that is also where things get complicated. First, the official state medical examination is reportedly complete with toxicology, but the results are sealed, held inside a case file headed to a grand jury with no public timeline on when that process begins. Second, an anonymous professional complaint lands on the desk of a nursing board, targeting Nolan's mother, a working nurse, a grieving mother, a woman who had never received a professional complaint before in her career. It arrives in the middle of an open death investigation involving her son. Third, on one side, you have a legal defense fund raising over $158,000, launched by people who say they were Nolan's friends. On the other side, you have subpoenas issued for social media records, evidence preservation notices sent to families, and a wrongful death action that legal analysts say may already be in motion. This video is not about theories. It is not about online narratives. It is about what is actually documented, what is actually on the record, and what that record still cannot answer. Let's start there.
As investigators piece together what happened in connection with the death of Nolan Wells, you have his friends raising legal defense money, Nolan's mom reportedly being investigated for professional misconduct, the signs of potential litigation mounting. What exactly is going on right now? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He was a college football player. On July 4th, he went on a boating trip with a group of friends to Horn Island, a barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. At some point, according to reporting by ABC News and others, Nolan did not return to the boat with the rest of the group. 2 days later, his body was found washed ashore. That sequence of events is documented. What happened in between? Specifically what happened in those hours on that island is still, as of now, publicly unresolved. The family retained attorney Ben Crump, a prominent civil rights lawyer who has represented families in other high-profile cases. They ordered an independent autopsy. That independent examination came back with the cause and manner of death listed as undetermined, not accidental, not homicide. Undetermined, the official state medical examination, conducted separately, has reportedly been completed and includes a toxicology report. But those results are part of a sealed investigative file. According to reporting, that file is expected to go before a grand jury for potential criminal charges. No timeline has been confirmed publicly for when that will happen.
So there are some things happening with the Nolan Wells case that we should talk about. This is the death of the 18-year-old college football player, went missing after a July 4th boating trip at the barrier island off of Horn Island in Mississippi, reportedly didn't go back on the boat with his friends, goes missing, and his body is found 2 days later washed ashore. The family is demanding a thorough investigation. They are demanding answers. They have hired attorney Ben Crump to navigate this situation for them. They ordered an independent autopsy of Nolan's body, but the cause and manner of death were undetermined. From that examination, we do know, based on reporting, the official state medical examination has reportedly been completed, presumably with the toxicology report, but we don't know the results yet. It's part of a larger case file that will, by all accounts, be sent to a grand jury for potential filing of criminal charges. The results won't be.
That is the documented foundation. Everything else we are going to talk about today sits on top of that foundation. And it is worth sitting with how much weight is being placed on top of facts that are still not fully public. Now, here is the part that most coverage has not slowed down enough to examine carefully. According to reporting by WLBT, the Mississippi Board of Nursing opened a professional misconduct investigation against Christine Wells Winsley, Nolan's mother. The complaint was anonymous. It arrived while Christine was publicly advocating for answers into her son's death. The Mississippi Board of Nursing, it is worth noting, eventually closed the case. Christine confirmed this herself on Facebook, saying the investigation had been dropped and describing the experience as adding more hurt to an already devastating time.
I love my job and I love my patients. Now, Rich, the reason I wanted to bring you on is there's a lot of civil components to this. There's a lot of ways that the legal system is being used here. And I think about this, whether the allegations in that anonymous complaint were true or not. It seems, it being dropped probably weren't. But the timing of it is suspicious. Does Ben Crump have a point about this, about potentially weaponizing different legal systems in this search for the truth?
Ben Crump publicly characterized the complaint as a warning shot. His position, stated to media, was that the timing was not coincidental. That filing an anonymous professional complaint against a grieving nurse who had no prior disciplinary history in the middle of a death investigation involving her son was a way of sending a message. Now, here is where we have to be careful. That characterization is disputed. We do not have documented evidence of who filed the anonymous complaint. We do not know their identity or their motive. What we do know, and this is on the record, is that Christine Wells Winsley had no prior complaints on her professional record, that the complaint arrived during a period of intense public scrutiny around her son's death, and that the board closed the investigation. Whether the timing was coincidental, or whether it was something more deliberate, is not something the documented record can currently resolve. That is a genuine open question. And the honest answer is, we do not know.
Well, I think you have to say that the timing is at least suspicious. If it's true that she's never had a complaint lodged against her throughout her career, and all of a sudden there's an investigation into the death of her son, and there's public interest, and all of a sudden there's an anonymous complaint out of the blue, you would say at least that timing is suspicious and that complaint needs to be scrutinized.
What we can say is this. The sequence of events, a nurse with a clean record, a death investigation, an anonymous complaint, a dropped case, is documented. The interpretation of that sequence is where the facts end and where the competing narratives begin. And that distinction matters, because in cases like this, the interpretation often travels faster than the facts.
To me, it supports the argument. This is why the family got outside counsel. This is why they've moved forward with an independent investigation, because the idea would be that they are vulnerable. They are vulnerable to, I think the argument is that this could have been all swept up under the rug, that it was going to be a quick investigation, that, what happened to Nolan, tragic accident, but to get a lawyer and to bring a spotlight on this and to protect their rights. I'm still navigating, the role of an attorney like Ben Crump in all this, but I'm also not, I can't deny there is a value to that.
Here is a detail that does not get enough attention in the wider coverage of this case. According to a preliminary document from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, cited in reporting by ABC News, witnesses reportedly told investigators that Nolan had been drinking heavily with friends on the day he went missing. That is what the document, as reported, says. Christine Wells Winsley appeared on the Don Lemon Show and disputed that account directly. She challenged the framing, questioned the sourcing, and cited a conversation she said she had with one of Nolan's football coaches, who reportedly told her he spoke with Nolan between 2:45 and 3:30 that afternoon, and that Nolan appeared, in his words, perfectly fine. Now, both of those things can exist simultaneously in the record. A preliminary document can reflect what witnesses told investigators at an early stage. A football coach's recollection can reflect something different from a different moment in the same afternoon. What neither of those things can do, individually or together, is settle the factual question of Nolan's condition in the hours before he went missing. That question belongs to the toxicology report, and that report is not yet public.
He went missing. This was reported by ABC News. Well, Christine, his mom, goes on the Don Lemon show and denies this, says, if you were in our situation, how would you feel if there were millions of people who were saying, oh, hey, well, he was at an island, he was heavily drunk. And I'm like, but was he though? Or is this a narrative that you guys want to use? And she even apparently said that one of Nolan's football coaches told her that he saw Nolan that day between 2:45 p.m., 3:30 p.m. local time. Quote, he was like, Christine, yeah, we talked for a while. We talked about college. We talked about his life, his plans. And he was like, he was perfectly fine. Because I think it had bothered him too that there was this narrative of, oh, he was sloppy drunk. So what do you, big question, overall picture I have here, Rich, I just wanted to lay some of this out. As they're talking about this, as they're commenting on this, is there anything that gives you concern for the family or Ben Crump about what they're saying?
This is one of the clearest examples in this case of how a specific claim that Nolan was heavily intoxicated has circulated widely and confidently on both sides before the document that could actually settle it has been released. That is a pattern worth recognizing. Preliminary information gets treated as a conclusion, and conclusions get shared before the evidence supports them. That is not justice. For anyone, it is noise, and it makes the actual investigation harder.
I haven't watched a lot of what Ben Crump has said. I know about it, and I know that he's drawn some criticism for some of his comments. So let me start with this premise. From the point of view of the investigation, it would be preferable to me if the family wasn't making a lot of public comments, because I think talking about evidence publicly can potentially interfere with an investigation. Investigators don't tell you everything they found every day during an investigation. They do it step by step. They do it methodically. They talk to witnesses. They look at forensics. They look at evidence. And ultimately, when they draw conclusions, they coordinate with law enforcement, and either something gets, charges are brought or they're not. But you're not entitled to an.
Now, let's talk about the Legal Defense Fund, because this is a documented development that raises real and specific questions. According to reporting, a Give Send Go fundraiser was launched on behalf of friends who were reportedly with Nolan on July 4th. The names listed as beneficiaries include Warren Hudson, Jack Spatalo, and Morgan Seymour. By the time coverage of this fund began circulating widely, it had raised over $158,000. The fund's stated goals are twofold. The first is to defend against an anticipated wrongful death action from Nolan's family. The second is to fund defamation litigation against social media figures, news outlets, and others the fund's organizers allege have spread false information. The fund's language is pointed and specific in who it names. It references Ben Crump and Al Sharpton by name. It uses language accusing them of exploiting the tragedy for financial and political purposes. Those are serious allegations. As of this recording, they are disputed and not proven in any court record.
People in the public, online, who are viewing this in multiple ways, and the family and Ben Crump have been getting criticism, and we've seen, the friends getting criticism. And there's something that I have to call out here that I thought was really interesting. So apparently Nolan's purported friends and their families have launched this legal defense fund on Give, Send, Go. Currently raised at the time of this recording over $158,000.
What is documented is that the individuals listed in the fund have stated they cooperated with investigators. According to reporting, they have answered questions from authorities and provided information. No charges have been filed against any of them. Legal analysts commenting on this case have pointed out something worth noting. Getting a lawyer does not mean you did something wrong. In a high-profile case involving a potential death investigation, where witnesses are being questioned by authorities and targeted online with threats, getting legal representation is a reasonable and legally sound decision. The two things, cooperation with investigators and seeking legal counsel, are not in conflict. They can and often do exist together. What the Legal Defense Fund does signal, clearly and on the record, is that those involved anticipate civil litigation. They are not waiting for it to arrive. They are preparing for it now.
Portion of what it says. It says, quote, No friend should have to grieve the loss of a brother. But instead of being allowed to mourn, what followed was an unprecedented online campaign of accusations, harassment, threats, and defamation. Since Nolan's death, Warren Hudson, Jack Spatalo, Morgan Seymour, and many others have been inundated with death threats, threats of violence, and defamation. They have been falsely and wrongly blamed by individuals online and in the media of either directly or indirectly having a hand in Nolan's death. Most of them could not even attend their own best friend's funeral. Why? Because race baiters sent a deranged army after them online in the name of justice. Since the beginning of the investigation, these young men have cooperated with authorities, turned over all the information they had, and provided an overwhelming number of witnesses accounting for their whereabouts. Some of them even resorted to speaking up publicly to defend themselves against baseless allegations. But unfortunately, it has become clear that the truth doesn't matter. It goes on to say, lives have been turned upside down, and some have had to go into hiding. Al Sharpton, Ben Crump, and the usual suspects of social media personalities, national news media, and local provocateurs continue to invent and spread false narratives and lies with no accountability. This is the typical tactic of Ben Crump and the like. They come to communities like the Gulf Coast under the guise of seeking justice. But it has become painfully clear that their version of justice is stirring division, ruining lives, and then leaving when the money is dried up. We have seen this same pattern time and time again, most recently during the Carmelo Anthony trial. No matter what anyone believes about an ongoing investigation, our legal system exists.
And that brings us to the civil picture, because this is where the documented record gets genuinely complicated. According to reporting from People magazine and ABC News, the Wells family has sent evidence preservation notices to families connected to the investigation, including to a judge whose son was reportedly present on the trip. These notices are a legal mechanism. They formally request that potential evidence not be destroyed. Attorneys use them when they are building toward a civil action. Additionally, according to reporting, subpoenas have been filed seeking records from social media companies, including TikTok, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Meta, and the location sharing app Life360. These were filed in connection with the estate of Nolan Wells. Taken together, these are documented steps that legal analysts say are consistent with preparation for a wrongful death lawsuit.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts because you covered a lot of ground. You covered a lot of ground there, my friend. But let me start with the fund, okay? Because, again, this is something we're seeing now. You know, Luigi Mangione has raised $1.5 million in his legal defense fund, right?
Very different. Very different.
I understand, but I'm saying a lot of people, either defendants or victims or others, set up these funds. And one thing I want to encourage people is when they look at a fund like that, to try to scrutinize it and make sure you know where your money's going before you give it, because there's not a lot of control. Once you give $100 to some give, send, go, you don't have any control over what that money is really used for. So you want to really take a look at that fund and make sure that it's being used for things you want it to be used for. I find the idea that people would attack these other young men who were on this trip without knowing any facts, and I know that that's happened. I don't think that's right. I think they have a valid point there.
Here is the question the documented record raises, and this is a genuine interpretive question worth thinking about. A wrongful death action does not require proof that someone intentionally caused a death. Negligence is enough. If a legal team can argue that leaving someone alone on an island constituted negligence that contributed to a death, that is a viable legal claim, regardless of what the criminal investigation ultimately determines. So here is what I want to ask you directly. Do you think pursuing civil litigation in a case where the criminal investigation is still ongoing and no charges have been filed is a legitimate path to finding answers? Or does it add a layer of legal complexity that could actually slow the truth down? Think about that. Drop your read in the comments. There is no clean answer here, and the documented record does not resolve it.
Nobody should assume there's a racial component to this unless there's evidence to support that. And the fact that there are people of different races is not enough fact to support that there's a racial component, right? So I don't want to see that jump to conclusion. I don't like a lot of speculation about who must have done what, or this must have happened, or it had to be this way, because you don't know. Now, you mentioned that the other guys who were on the boat have been cooperating with authorities. That's what I understand. That's what I've heard, that they have been answering questions posed to them by authorities. I haven't heard anything about people not cooperating or refusing to answer questions. And that's a good sign. They should be credited for that. And of course, it should be investigated, because even if they are cooperating, it doesn't mean that somebody didn't do something wrong, and we have to try to get to the truth.
There is one more documented development that belongs in this conversation. According to reporting from Law and Crime, an individual named Bart Edmondson Jr., described as connected to Nolan's social circle, retained an attorney after being accused online of involvement in Nolan's death. His attorney released a statement describing those accusations as egregiously false and defamatory. The attorney also sent a cease and desist letter to an online content creator alleging the spread of misinformation.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting that they say the first purpose is to defend against a wrongful death action, almost as if they believe, if the way I'm reading it, that Nolan's family would sue, right? Because there are kind of hints, right? Nolan's mom has appeared to file these subpoenas for records from social media companies, TikTok, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Meta, Life360. This is part of the legal case regarding the estate of Nolan Wells, seeks all this kind of information. It was also reported by People magazine that a preservation notice for evidence was sent by Nolan's family to the families of Nolan's friends, these investigative bodies. Apparently, according to People and ABC News, one was sent to Ashley Cole, this judge who I mentioned before, whose son was reportedly with Nolan Wells that day. So it seems there's a possibility when you hire Ben Crump and you're having this information, these notices, they may be preparing to go the wrongful death route to get the answers that they feel they may not get in the criminal investigation, right?
Well, to get answers, right, and also to get financial recovery. I mean, when if you have multiple people out there, it's not impossible that the families of some of these kids have insurance that would cover that kind of litigation. It's not impossible that you could cast a wide net wrongful death action with a bunch of defendants and find some that have some financial wherewithal and piece together a recovery. You could probably frame a complaint, even if nobody killed him or did anything intentionally. You can probably assert negligence. Why'd they leave him alone on the island? They shouldn't have left without him. That was negligent. That helped lead to his death. So an attorney could pursue wrongful death litigation in the hope of either coming up with the real answers of what happened or getting some sort of financial recovery for the family or both.
Separately, according to reporting, 3 individuals have been criminally charged with making threats in connection with this case. Those charged are not believed to be connected to Nolan personally. The threats were allegedly directed at a judge, a witness, and local officials. That last part is worth stopping on. 3 criminal charges for threats in a case where no criminal charges have yet been filed in connection with Nolan's death itself. The online atmosphere around this case has produced criminal charges of its own kind, before a grand jury has even convened, before the toxicology results are public, before a single civil lawsuit has been filed. That tells you something about the pressure surrounding this investigation. And it tells you something about how quickly a documented tragedy becomes an undocumented war.
And let me just ask you this again. What is the line between asking questions, giving an opinion, free speech versus defamation?
Well, I'm going to assume it's speech publicly. So if you say something in a court document, it generally is entitled to absolute privilege and cannot be a defamation. So if you file a complaint, or by the way, if you file a complaint with the Mississippi Board of Health, that's probably privileged too. You're probably not going to be sued for defamation about that. So the first question is where did you make the speech? How did you make the speech? Now, let's assume you made it publicly. You made it over the internet, or you stood up on a street corner. Then the question is going to be, are you making statements of fact or opinions? If you say, I know that this individual was responsible for the death, that is a factual assertion. That can be defamatory. You're accusing somebody of a crime. If you say, my view, in my opinion, is this investigation isn't looking hard enough at the evidence. The investigation ought to consider this, that, and the other thing and really probe. That is more opinion. You're not necessarily saying that you know as a factual matter anybody did anything. You're simply offering opinion, and opinions generally cannot be defamatory. I mean, that's a very simplistic view. And as you know, because you've looked at a lot of these cases, a lot of statements are really on that line between are they opinion or factual.
Yeah.
Here is where the case stands on the record right now. The official cause and manner of Nolan Wells' death remain publicly undetermined. The state medical examination, including toxicology, is reportedly complete, but sealed pending the grand jury process. No criminal charges have been filed in connection with his death. A civil action appears to be in preparation, but has not yet been filed. A legal defense fund is raising money in anticipation of that action. 3 people face criminal charges for threats made in connection with the case, not for anything related to Nolan's death itself.
For it. And just to put it into perspective, we've talked about this before, but there was an apparent friend of Nolan Wells, Bart Edmondson Jr., planning on taking legal action because some have speculated online or accused him of being somehow involved or connected to what happened to Nolan. He retained an attorney, Russell Latino, who released a statement to Law and Crime saying we've talked about this before, but after a week of egregiously false and defamatory accusations against Bart Edmondson Jr., accusations which resulted in credible death threats now being investigated by the FBI, the Edmondson family has released a statement addressing their son's knowledge of and cooperation in the Nolan Wells investigation, and he actually sent us a copy of a cease and desist.
There is a thread in this case that the grand jury process will eventually pull on: the toxicology results, the full investigative file, the witness accounts, tested under oath. When that thread gets pulled, a lot of the narratives circulating right now on every side will either be confirmed or will collapse. The honest thing to say is that we do not know which ones. What we will be watching and what we will bring you as it develops is the grand jury timeline, the civil filings if and when they arrive, and the defamation litigation that may be coming for online figures who crossed from opinion into verifiable false claims of fact. This case is not over. The record is not closed.
Yeah, so in a lot of cases, you really want to wait, if you can, until after the criminal proceedings are over, if there are any, to bring civil litigation. So if you're going to be a witness and you can wait, you have to worry about statute of limitations, which can be kind of quick on things like wrongful death actions. But you may want to hold your powder on your civil case until you've done all your testifying in a criminal case, precisely to avoid the kind of thing you're talking about. And also because you can't really proceed with civil litigation until the criminal component is done if you're suing people who face criminal charges.
And the one thing Nolan Wells deserves more than any theory, more than any narrative, more than any fundraiser is the truth. Documented, verified, on the record. If you have been following this case closely, tell us in the comments what specific piece of evidence or testimony you think the grand jury needs to see first. Follow for the next update, because when those sealed results move, we will be here.